Good Saturday morning to everyone at Keller Williams. It is Saturday, let's see here, September 14th. Football Saturday, sun's shining bright. Summer's winding down, but it's gorgeous weather outside. And I decided to come in and make a quick video for you with some update changes. So, everybody, since the NAR regulations kicked in, how's it going? How are we feeling? Haven't had anybody not get paid a commission yet, so that's good news. But we've learned a lot in the past month on this, and I think it's important to go over some things. So, for those of you that have been through the trainings in August, thank you for coming. Your dialogue was great, and we enjoyed having you in the office to interact with us as we taught some of the things that evolved out of this. For those of you that haven't attended a class, look for training calendar in October probably to bring this class back. But in the meantime, I'm going to go through some of the highlights of that training program so you have a thorough understanding of it and you can watch it in a short amount of time. Now, if you went to the training class, you feel comfortable with everything that's going on, stay tuned. We're going to get over some changes here in the first 5 minutes or so that I want to go over with you real quick for compliance purposes and some of the changes that we've seen already or differences, I guess, between brokerages. So we're going to dive right in. If this is all foreign to you, stay tuned. We're going to get into the meat of the changes. But if you've been through the changes, this is one of the big things coming here. Originally, we said we wanted that broker agreement signed on all deals, buy side or sell side. So both brokers are in agreement on commission. But what we've learned is that we have a diverse group of brokers at GRAR and across the state, and not everybody is in agreement on how commissions are being paid. So what we've determined is that some have their own form, and we will sign that, but make sure your broker, me, or your team lead has eyes on it to make sure it's valid and that it works for us both. And then we've learned also that some won't sign the GRAR form, and for two reasons, and really quite valid. They aren't sharing the commission, but the seller will pay the buyer agency fee, or concessions are being paid by the seller, and so it's not a sharing arrangement at all. And this kind of makes sense to me. We may develop a form that has basically 4 check boxes on it that says, hey, the broker sharing commission, and it's X. The seller's paying commission and it's X. The seller's offering seller concessions and it's X. And or you're not getting anything, get your own buyer agency fee from your buyer. That's probably where we're going to go with this. But for right now, realize that for our purposes, from a compliance standpoint, if there are concessions in the purchase agreement, then you don't need a broker agreement. Buyers paying their own buyer agency fee through dual entry accounting, as I've explained. And if the concessions are noted in there, the buyer can pay their buyer agency fee with those concessions. Has to be in the purchase agreement, cannot just come from the MLS. Keep that in mind. You have to have concessions noted in the purchase agreement and to what amount in order for that to be valid. Now, the buyer asks via the addendum, what I call the ask sheet, and the broker is not sharing. So your buyer and seller have signed off agreeing that the seller is going to pay the buyer agency fee of X, and the other broker, the listing broker, said, hey, we never offered to share that, and so we're not considering sharing that. It's just the seller paying one of the buyer's fees. No broker agreement sign needed. So now brings us to our third option here would be the buyer or the broker on our side, we're the listing agent or we're the buyer's agent, is sharing and has communicated via text, phone call, sign in the yard, placard in the house, maybe it's mowed in the backyard like we joked about, that they are offering 3%. Again, that's our standard to list for 6 and to share 3. A signed broker agreement is needed. So when there is a true commission sharing arrangement where the other broker or we as the broker, listing broker, have indicated that we are sharing the commission, we do need that broker agreement signed in your compliance, in your docs for compliance. So that's changes that we've had already in the first month. Stay tuned. There'll probably be more coming. Could be new forms, could be other policy changes. And so for those of you that didn't make it to a class, this is a recap of what we covered in those classes. And here's what we know. Key components of the NAR settlement. No offer of compensation after 8/13/2024 is published on the MLS. We need a signed agreement to show property that isn't your listing. No guarantee of compensation from the listing broker. Buyer's agent cannot collect more than their buyer agency contract states. And sellers do not have to offer buyer broker compensation. So you saw in mid-August, offers of compensation on the MLS went away. And we've been talking about not having to offer anything since middle of March. So we should be having conversations with our buyers and sellers about how agents get paid. It's a pretty natural conversation for me to sit down with a seller and say, hey, traditionally we were listing at 6 and offering 3. We still think that's a good idea because there's going to be good buyers agents out there with good buyers that may not be able to afford your house if you don't offer some form of compensation. And quite honestly, the conversations have gone pretty smoothly with most of my sellers over the past 6 months to say, well, everybody is doing some work on this and somebody should get paid. We went over some of the options, and we'll go over those in a minute. Recently, when we listed some investment properties for a seller, and we discussed that, and he goes, "I really like the old way of doing it. Let's list at 6 and offer 3." So, we're starting to see some statistics show that 75 to 80% of sellers are offering some form of compensation, be it a concession, a buyer broker fee, or willing to pay that on the buyer's behalf. So don't get freaked out by this. I don't want to say business as usual because it has changed and we need to be aware of that. But for the most part, we are seeing commissions being earned on both sides of the table. And it is continuing to be good from that regard. Now, I've crossed this out. This was one of my slides. The MLS had put in a field to offer concessions. We took that away, and you can still offer concessions in your MLS comments. It has to be in the public remarks and I shouldn't say or because you can't do just agent notes. It has to be publicly published. And we'll go into a little bit why I don't necessarily like the concessions idea, but it is a vehicle that your seller can offer buyer agency fees. We know this, the date was August 13th. Exhibit G, I think we're past that point. That was a form in our packet that amended the listing contracts to say that all commissions are negotiable. It was just a little bump in the road from a procedural standpoint, and we got past that. So thank you for getting all those signed. Changes to the GRAR and MLS policy that we need to be aware of. One, that disclosed dual commission rule goes away. So when we listed a property and say you went in and listed it for 6%, and the seller says, hey, would you take less of a commission if you sold it yourself? And you might say, yeah, I'll do it for 5. That does not need to be published anymore because it unleveled the playing field from a guaranteed compensation standpoint. And if you take away the guarantee of compensation, there's no need to disclose this anymore. You can still do it, but you're going to be responding to calls and questions and texts about how you're offering commission, or if you are at all. There's no unilateral guarantee for compensation anymore. And so if your seller instructs you to offer 3% to a buyer's agent and to collect 5 if you do it yourself, that doesn't need to be published anymore. And I don't want to say no more procuring cause, but procuring cause is going to be tougher to prove. And remember, procuring cause situation arises when a buyer's agent or even a dual agent or even just a sub-agent of the seller writes an offer on a house and gets paid to bring the buyer. And somebody else raises their hand and says, hey, I've got a buyer agency contract, I'm due compensation, or I was working with these folks, I've showed them the house 3 times, and they went and wrote the offer with somebody else. And so you get this butting of heads of who's actually due payment. And there's no formula for it. Usually goes to a mediation process where all interested parties get to plead their case as to why they are due a commission. And some of it boils, it's not always about who showed the house first. It's not always about the contract in place between the buyer and the buyer's agent. And it's a combination of who did the work, who did initially bring them the listing. And so that's really going to go away because it's really up to the buyer to collect or the buyer's agent to collect the fee from their buyer if it goes unpaid. And if you're not paid for work you didn't do, you're going to have to negotiate that with your buyer. So obviously, if you get into that situation, contact us, contact me for, further discussion on it. There won't be arbitration of commission disputes at the board level really anymore. So, and then also no more reserved buyers. And so we don't know if Uncle Joe, who you're holding back in your back pocket to keep from paying a commission to as a seller, has a buyer agency contract or not, and he can pay that buyer that buyer's agent directly if he wants to. So what we're asking for reserve buyers is to just use delay of submission, like you would traditionally say they're painting the front porch and putting in new carpet, and we can't actually bring the house to market for 2 weeks. Same thing. Uncle Joe has a week, 5 days, 10 days, or whatever to make up his mind. And then you would be able to list it actively on the MLS. So you do not have to reserve buyers anymore on the MLS. So in our packet of forms, we had some exhibits labeled, and we had taken these from GRAR's training. And so they were labeled A, B, C, and D. We had some small changes to our buyer agency form, which the good thing is we didn't have a lot of changes to that. And so it didn't make it into GRAR's packet, so I don't have an exhibit on that, but we'll go through these things briefly here. So your listing agreement, this is a slide from GRAR. Paragraph 10 is the major change to all of this. You'll see up top here, they added a flat fee option or a processing fee plus option. Now, I'm still okay if you're traditionally putting our $395 broker fee in the other section, as long as it's still in there. And we've had agents that do it both ways. Some are more comfortable presenting it as a one line like this, where you'd say $395 plus 6% of the sale price, or a flat fee. And so really that boils down to your comfort level. That's not a huge change. The other changes that you want to note in paragraph 10 are down below here. Again, part of the settlement statement was to offer a flat fee option in the listing contract. Our goal, our standard is still to list for 6% up here and offer 3 to a buyer's agent. Now, you remember in your docs training class, we did sub-agent of the seller is 0. It's not your half of the commission. It's what you would offer to an agent writing an offer that is not representing their buyer. And so we really like to offer 0 there, because we don't want an unrepresented agent or an agent not representing their client to represent our client through default. So we disincentivize them by offering 0 here. Buyer's agent gets 3% here in our traditional 6030 model. And then you'd put 0 for transaction coordinator for the same reason you'd put 0 for sub-agent of the seller. Now, if you're doing flat fee, it should be 0x 0 here. This goes on to say that you are if you're entering zeros in the above field, seller and broker agree that no compensation will be offered to a cooperating broker. Now, my recommendation would be to discuss this with your sellers about why it's beneficial to offer a buyer broker fee. We know EXP, I believe Berkshire Hathaway, even though I haven't set eyes on it, some of the other brokers out there are just listing their side and saying, if somebody wants to ask for a commission, we will bring that to the seller and discuss that with them. Again, it's really all about the seller's bottom line. And so whether you're listing at 6 and offering 3 and paying 3, or you're listing at 3, offering 0 and then negotiating to 3. We know that there's buyers out there that aren't going to be able to pay out of pocket to their buyer's agent, and that would eliminate traffic through the home potentially. And it's just like if a buyer goes through a home and the Air stove and the Bosch dishwasher and the touchscreen see-through clear screen fridge are all gone, they're probably looking at writing a check for $7,000 to $10,000 for new appliances, maybe more. So in a buyer's head, it's about the math equation of what is it going to cost to acquire this home? And on the seller's side, it's always about what is my bottom line? What is my net? And so that's where the intent of this settlement is really steeped in, is about negotiation and working through a deal that works for both parties. So you'll see here the addition here: broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. That was the other terms of the settlement that our contracts need to state. So what do we do when somebody comes in, or you go on a listing appointment and they say, well, I want to negotiate your commission? Well, we're seeing a fee for like a menu of services being effective in this regard, where if you provide your services at different levels of luxury, if you will. And we're not a discount broker here. We are a full service broker. So your offering should be, this is what I do as a full service agent for you. There's a option to upgrade that. Maybe you add a Matterport to your multimedia package. Maybe you're sending out 500 postcards versus 200. We've kind of test marketed this with some of our listing appointments. It's been well received, and you'll find that a lot of the people pick middle of the road, which could result in you actually getting a higher side of the listing side of the commission. So this slide from GRAR, there is now a distinct difference between a seller authorizing the sharing of brokerage fee with a cooperating broker and the seller offering concessions to the buyer. So paragraph 11 in your listing contract addresses concessions offered. Now, keep in mind, and this is why I'm not a huge proponent of offering concessions, is a buyer can use those concessions for any fee that they have for closing costs. So we don't know what that buyer's agency contract is set at. Maybe that buyer from ABC Realty has a commission agreement at 2%. You're offering 3% concessions. They ask for it in the contract. You give it to them. And now they've got a 2% buyer agency fee to pay. And that seller can now use that, or that buyer, I'm sorry, can use that 1% remaining for their title insurance, buy down the loan, closing fees, et cetera. So that's why I kind of think that in our market conditions right now, it's probably not a bad idea to forego offering any concessions or just a flat amount of concessions for, say, 3% of the sale price. And instead, going back up here to paragraph 10 and listing in our traditional model of 6% and offering 3% to a buyer's agent. And I just think it's better for your seller, but discuss this with your seller and work through it with them. So again, our goals, our standards: 6% listing with 3% to a buyer's agent, or 3% listing with a 3% seller concession. If you're going to offer concessions in paragraph 11, make sure that your side of the listing is covered in that top part of paragraph 10, but listing at 6, offering 3% to a buyer's agent and trying to communicate it as a 3% seller concession could really put your seller on the hook for 9% commissions. And that's why we say why you shouldn't list at 6, offer 3 and concessions. Does that make sense? Great. Now, our buyer agency doc has not changed much. I alluded to that fact. We changed some verbiage. In paragraph 5, you'll see the statement: brokerage firms' fee for service rendered is not set by law and is fully negotiable. Again, term of the settlement had to go in our buyer agency document. We went on to add some language: broker may not receive compensation for brokerage services provided to the buyer from any source that exceeds the amount agreed upon herein or subsequent written agreement between broker and buyer. Now, that's another reason why I'm offering or suggesting that in paragraph 5, you'll see we added a flat fee of blank here. But again, fill out your buyer agency contract for 3%. If they're offering 2 and you can't get the additional percent, or the buyer's not willing to pay it or doesn't have the money to pay it, maybe you make the decision to take the 2% and move forward. Perhaps you can work it out, get a 1% seller concession, or get the 1% from the buyer. It's all about your value and the buyer paying for that value. However, if you go in there and you're filling it out for 1%, you're offered 3. Now you got to go back to your buyer and say, hey, I got you the house at the price you wanted, but if you sign here, I get an extra 2%. Maybe you got a good relationship with them. Maybe they'll sign that. They don't care, but buyers may bristle at that. One of the questions that had come up in our classes was about maybe a builder incentive. We know Allen Edwin, if you sell 1 home per year, they pay a premium of 3.5%. Well, if you've got that filled out for 3 and you sell an Allen Edwin home and you know you're getting 3.5, you can amend that buyer broker contract. I think that conversation is pretty easy to say, hey, look, Keller Williams has a relationship with these large builders. We bring them enough business where they offer us a compensation bonus. And I need you to sign here in order for our company to be eligible to receive that. I doubt you're going to get a lot of pushback on that, but just be aware that you cannot get paid more than what your buyer agency contract states. Paragraph 6, buyer agrees that by accepting as a fee parts of the proceeds of the transaction from the seller or through the seller's broker shall not be deemed the agent of the seller. So really that's just about representation. It says, hey, just because the buyer accepts a fee from the seller or from the seller's broker, they are still representing the buyer. All right, Exhibit B. This is our one kind of what I'm calling our 1-day showing agreement. And so what that entails is a 1-page form. So if we work in this speed to lead model, we know that the regulations have changed and that you have to have an agency agreement or a signed agreement with a buyer before showing them a home. And trust me, for us old goats, it is difficult when you go out show a house to somebody you've known for 20 years to remember to bring a piece of paper, let alone have them sign it. Personal testimony on that, but stay vigilant on that because we do want to be compliant. Keller Williams was named in the lawsuit. We don't know who's going to be checking buyer agency documents. And again, the buyer agency agreement is still your preferred method on this. However, if you look in your .loop or in your DocuSign forms, you're going to see the GRAR form buyer showing agreement. So if you work in that speed to lead model, you pick up a lead, somebody wants to see the house at 123 Main Street. You say, hey, look, I got to have a couple signatures from you before we show you the house. This is our new regulations, and use the words regulations. These are terms of a lawsuit settlement, not a change in the law. And so it's things that we've agreed to as an industry that are being monitored and probably tested to some extent by random callers that are reporting back to the attorneys that figured out the settlement and or the courts. So you pick up that call, you say, look, I need you to sign a couple things. Now we know that agency disclosure should be the first thing you always get signed. That's state law. That hasn't changed. So I would take an agency disclosure form. And I would take this form and fill it out again for your success fee. Maybe you call the other agent and say, hey, are you offering anything? You know what compensation is being offered or what the sellers are willing to pay up front. You fill it in. Maybe it's a friend of yours and they're not really house hunting, but they said, hey, I'll go buy this if we like it. And you might do that for a lower fee on a one-time basis. Again, you have to sell your value. You have to show your value and make sure you're putting your value in the $ amount there. But we only want to use check boxes 1 and 3 on that. And so 1 is that no per showing fee is going to be charged, which would pertain to box 2. So we want to check box 1 on this. Those are real estate activities for compensation, which would need to be paid to the broker. And we do not have the staff, the time, or the capability to process $25 payments for every time one of you might show a house. you want to bring me $25 every time you show a house, that's great. It's probably going to go in my desk drawer. Um, so checkbox 1, and then checkbox 3 would be for what we call the success fee. And so that success fee would be a compensation agreement, but this is a compensation agreement between you and the buyer that they would owe less anything being offered by the seller or the listing broker. So at least get this signed before you go out and show a house. Now, keep in mind, you can fill out our buyer agency contract for a day, a week, per property. It's still our preferred method of having a signed agreement with your buyer per the terms of the settlement than this one-page form, but this might be more agreeable to someone you haven't met that's interested in just seeing one home and allows you to build a relationship with them with maybe a less daunting task of getting our 3-page buyer agency signed. So, all right. Exhibit C in your packet. And so again, you don't have the packet in front of you. These are in your form. So I'm going to run through these real quick here. Let me screen share a different screen. And if we look at the listing agreement, you've got paragraph 10 and 11. You're seeing there in our updated forms. You've got the addendum to West Michigan Regional Purchase Agreement regarding brokerage fees. So what I'm calling this is the ask. And so as a buyer's agent, maybe it's an EXP listing where we know they're not even taking a listing that would talk about offering a commission, and or we just can't get a hold of somebody. We don't know. We're going in blind. And so we would mark this as single agency. Again, we're trying to avoid dual agency at all costs, and this would only be if it were your specific seller anyway, and you're gonna have this conversation with any buyer and seller to get that deal done. So we're really pertaining to this top half of this form. You're going to ask for your 3% here, or a flat fee, and send this over with the addendum noted in your purchase agreement. So in your purchase agreement, you can, in that other section, say the addendum regarding brokerage fees is a integral part of this contract. And so the seller would then present this, have a buyer and seller sign off on that. Now, in the event that you have a phone call, text exchange, however it's non-MLS published to you or communicated to you, you'd have a compensation agreement between brokers. And so if you call ABC Realty and they say, yes, we're offering 3% to a buyer's broker, then this is the form we need and want signed. This is between agents. And so at this point, we are letting agents sign this. I will sign them if they want the other broker to sign it. But so if you're on the listing side of this and you're offering that traditional model of 6 and 3%, and or you've been communicated to by the listing agent as the buyer's agent, you would then put your 3% or flat fee, maybe they're offering, in there and have both brokers sign off on it. Now, this is where the beginning of this video, we talked about how you are not required to have this on every transaction because it really doesn't pertain to every transaction. So if you have concessions agreed to in your purchase agreement, which is a line item in the purchase agreement on the first page, if you have concessions being paid, and keep in mind, an offer of concessions is not valid and binding until it's in your purchase agreement. Offer of concessions, or you ask via this form here because nothing is being offered and a seller agrees to pay it by signing here. We don't need this compensation form between brokers. All right, we went over our buyer agency contract, changes in paragraph 5 and 6, just slightly on that. And then I think that was it as far as forms go. And we'll go back to our PowerPoint slides here and talk about that brokerage fee addendum. So we're going to ask in that addendum to the purchase agreement when you don't know, or you're going in blind, or maybe they have even told you what the seller is willing to pay. Now, again, you can write this into your purchase agreement. You don't necessarily need the addendum, but you have to have specific wording in your purchase agreement because we've all been taught that by inserting commission into a purchase agreement on a listed property could be a violation. Well, if I'm asking as a Keller Williams agent for ABC Realty to pay my fee of 3%, now I'm interjecting a conversation between the seller and their listing broker, where they may have already agreed to a commission amount. I'm attempting to renegotiate a contract I'm not party to. And so that's where we've always trained to that point. Now, a buyer can ask for the seller to pay their buyer agency fee. So we have to be specific about that wording, and we want that to say specifically, buyer requests seller to pay for buyer's agency fee of X% of the sale price. So by asking the seller to pay the buyer agency fee, you're not in violation of any code of ethics, and it is completely legitimate for that purpose. So the GRAR compensation agreement between brokers, now that would be if we're offering a shared amount or another broker is offering a shared amount to us as a buyer's agent. So we're going to strike that it's a requirement on every deal, because that's really not going to be accurate. Oops, got away from myself here. So it won't be required on deals where there are concessions being paid, or you've asked in the purchase agreement for the seller to pay the buyer agency fee and there wasn't one being offered. So it's really only between brokers that we need that sign. All right, so new listing compliance. Your listing contracts must have 0x0 for listing commission, sub-agency of the seller, your side, plus a transaction coordinator. This really hasn't changed, guys. If you're listing in a traditional manner of 6% and offering 3%, it's still 030. If you're not offering anything in concessions, then make sure the zeros are in there. Now, our compliance is paying attention to this. Laura at our front desk does the majority of our compliance, and so we will be making sure that these are filled out correctly. If not, we're going to be going back to you and having amendments written. So we're past August 13th, so we don't need to worry about Exhibit G. Your buyer agency contracts must have compensation filled out. You don't know how many times we would see a buyer agency contract get turned in with a file where it said 0 or it was left blank. And you cannot have that. You cannot have conversations with your buyers anymore that it does not cost you anything to have a buyer's agent. The buyer showing agreement must be uploaded to Command if you're using that in lieu of a buyer agency contract, one or the other on the buy side of any deal. And we have to have some form of evidence of compensation in order to get paid. Because we don't want to get down this road if we didn't ask the listing broker, or they didn't respond, and we didn't have a way in the purchase agreement or via an addendum or via the broker agreement that you're getting paid, because I can't fight for a commission if we don't have evidence of it being paid somehow. And keep in mind, an offer via text is not a valid binding way to get paid. So make sure you're getting it in writing and getting it signed off on. So this is from GRAR, some quick MLS rule and policy changes. We need to eliminate the requirement that a listing must offer compensation to other participants. There's no way to filter listings based on concessions, and MLS data cannot be used to create another platform. So do not communicate during showing time, because that's tied to the MLS. If your website is on an IDX feed like WolfNet or one of the other ones, you cannot put on that website offering of commissions. You can put things in the house, can use sign writers, and it is very specific that there's no workaround on this. So don't try and bake language into your listing descriptions and try to subvert this somehow. There's just really no workaround. Another MLS and policy change: cooperation is redefined from money definition to the obligation to share information and work with the other brokers. So they took the commission aspect out of it. Brokers and agents may not represent their services are free unless absolutely no compensation will be received from any source for services rendered. That's on either side of the equation. Addition of a requirement for written buyer agreement prior to touring a home. Again, we have two vehicles for that, the one-day showing agreement or the one-page showing agreement, and then also your buyer agency contract. So what if I'm the listing agent? Do I still need a written buyer agreement to show a property? No. It is your listing. You're simply opening the home for a potential buyer. This includes open houses. You have to, however, use caution that you're not implying that the agent is working for the buyer. So the listing agent's broker firm permits dual agency and the listing agent takes on that role, then a buyer agency agreement or written buyer showing agreement is required. That rule has not changed. We really don't like buyer dual agency. We'd rather you just indicate that you're representing the seller and write the offer if someone calls on the sign or wanders into your open house and wants to write an offer. So, all right. Seller concessions, 3 new fields. Actually, this is also gone. You are really only putting concessions in the public remarks, and you can put the amount, but they have to be allowed to be able to be used for anything. Make sure your sellers understand that. Again, seller concessions offered via the MLS are not binding until they are established and agreed to in an executed purchase agreement. Make sure it's in writing, please. Another little change, the right of first refusal. We used to prohibit this on the MLS. It cannot be prohibited anymore, but it does need to be published. And so again, we look at a right of first refusal scenario. They're very rare, but Mr. Smith, the next door neighbor, has a right of first refusal on a property you're listing. And so you go and find a buyer. Now you have to go to Mr. Smith and say, would you like to buy it at X, which is what your purchase agreement amount is for. They have an opportunity to say it. And really what this did is it put the seller at risk of paying 2 commissions. Again, if the buyer agency contract is with the buyer, seller doesn't have to guarantee commission anymore. So but make sure you are putting in publishing that a right of first refusal does exist. It runs into a lot of condos have that actually, where you can somebody in the association or the association itself has an opportunity to buy back that property. So again, very rare. If you get into that situation and you want to go through this more in depth, just reach out to me. Buyers reserved by seller, again, we're utilizing that delay of submission form for those. You can extend it beyond 5 days now. You can probably identify more than one. Again, if your sellers has 3 buyers in their back pocket, and to avoid paying a commission to you, I don't know if that's a listing you want to take to begin with. So just make sure you use some judgment on that. Grar's presentation went on to go through some discuss certain scenarios. I think the scenarios with the commissions being paid, with the diversity of our brokerage base being some flat fee, some not offering anything, but allowing you to still negotiate it, some in our traditional model where we're still offering compensation, or like to. I think it varies so much that I don't think we can cover all the situations here today. We are going to continue ongoing training probably on a monthly basis on this. So for now, get comfortable with these forms, get comfortable having these conversations with your sellers and your buyers. And this will continue to evolve, and we'll continue to keep you up to date on things as it evolves. So you may see new forms coming out. You may see some form changes coming out. I appreciate the time. Pay attention to emails, communications, videos. Refer back to this if you need help, and don't hesitate to reach out and call. Again, that broker hotline number is 616-319-1271. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.